Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Muhammad Arhamad and I am from BS Chemistry Department. Today I tell you about Mercury process, Diaphragm process and Membrane process. These are the very essential process for the manufacturing of NaOH. Okay, the Mercury process, Diaphragm process and Membrane process are very useful in electrolysis of brine. What is brine? The concentrated salt solution is called brine. So with the help of brine, we can easily produce chlorine, sodium hydroxide, and hydrogen gas. So all these processes are useful for the formation of chlorine, sodium hydroxide, and hydrogen gas. Now, first of all, I tell you about what is mercury cell. The amalgam. Amalgam is an alloy of mercury. When amalgam cell react consists of slightly inclined trough over the bottom of the thin mercury layer is flow, which absorb the sodium and act as a cathode. The anode is made up of graphite and titanium, on which the chloride ion is attract and release chlorine gas by losing electrons. The sodium amalgam when mercury react with sodium, so they form a sodium amalgam. Further react with water to produce 50% sodium hydroxide, hydrogen gas, and also recover the mercury. So this is a systematic diagram, and this one is a inclined drop, which is uh, elect- uh, so it consists of inclined trough. So this one is an inclined trough, and in the above there is a mercury layer. So and these are the anodes. These are the anodes and these are the cathodes. So when brine solution are added from this way, so on electrolysis they can break into Na positive and Cl negative. When Cl negative lie on the anode, they release electron. By the release of an electron, and the chlorine gas the chloride ion convert into the chlorine gas. So we can extract it from this way. So here is a reaction in which two chloride ion react to produce chlorine and two electrons are removed. So with the help of anode, these two electrons move toward the cathode. So the sodium gain the electron from cathode, and they react with mercury. By this way, they form a sodium amalgam. So these amalgam are further are involved in dissolved in water. By this way, the water contain H positive and OH negative ion. So when they add into the water, the sodium amalgam break into the sodium and amalgam by releasing electron. So this electron is gained by hydrogen, and they convert into the hydrogen gas. So this sodium react with hydroxyl ion to produce a soda ash or sodium hydroxide. So this mercury is recovered in this process, and with the help of an pump they shift into the upper inclined trough. By this way, this process is this is a cyclic process. And what is depleted brine? When the brine is added in this cell, they convert it to sodium and chloride ion. So the concentration of a salt in water is a decline by this way. So the decline concentration of salt in water is called a depleted brine. So depleted brine again shift into the chamber, and we start to evaporate the water in this solution. By this way, we can again and collect a brine. So the brine solution again pass to this section. Description and important points for mercury gas. The cathode surface must be 10 to 30 meters square. Mercury layer thick up to 3 millimeter. 0.4 to 0.4 concentration of sodium in mercury. 50 to 180 anode per cell. brine throughput per cell 3 to 20 meter cube per volume. At canode, at anode, the chloride attach on the anode and they release an electron. By this way, the chlorine in gas are removed. So when at cathode, the zinc amalgam, there is a layer of zinc amalgam. So the sodium and zinc amalgam react with in the presence of an electron which is passed from anode to cathode. They convert into the sodium amalgam. So in other chamber, when sodium amalgam and react with water, they produce sodium hydroxide ion, mercury, and hydrogen gas. So here is the advantages and disadvantages. The main advantage of this cell is that we can produce 50% NaOH and where the chlorine, pure chlorine gas is escape out. And the main disadvantage is that it is costly for brine concentration because in this region the depleted brine, if we start to evaporate the water from depleted brine in for the formation of concentrated brine. That's why it is highly costly for brine concentration and it is highly and it is also highly cost for installation. Now I tell you about diaphragm process. In diaphragm, the diaphragm process consists of box, anode, cathode, and asbestos. Asbestos is a permeable layer. Anode is made up of titanium on which the chloride is attract and release chlorine gas by losing electrons. These electrons move towards the cathode. Cathode made up of steel, so hydrogen ion gain electrons from the cathode and form hydrogen gas. Asbestos is present between anode and cathode. It is only permeable for sodium ion to pass through it. Sodium ion move from anode to cathode and cathode chamber of from the asbestos and react with sodium hydroxide ion, react with hydroxide ion to form sodium hydroxide. Here is a systematic diagram in which a concentrated brine, in this chamber there is a concentrated brine solution and in this chamber there is a water. So when the concentrated brine solution are added into it, as we know that they can break into sodium ions and chloride ions. So these are the anodes. The chloride ions are negative charge. Due to the negative charge, they attract toward the anode. When they attack to the anode, they release an electron. After the releasing of an electron, the chloride ion converts into the chlorine gas. So in this chamber, we can get a chlorine gas. The electrons which are present in anode, they start to move from anode to cathode, and these negative charge are available on the cathode. So the water when gain electron, they break into the hydrogen and hydroxyl ion. So these hydroxyl ion react with sodium, they form a sodium hydroxide. But the reason, but they form a dilute solution of sodium hydroxide because these permeable wall through this permeable water, the brine solution also pass through it. By this way, in the product, we can get a two products, sodium hydroxide and the brine. By this way, we can convert into the transfer into this solution into another chamber and then start to concentrate it. By this way, the hydroxyl ion are evaporated and the sodium NaCl are settled down, and then we separate the NaCl. By this way, we can get the sodium hydroxyl ion, sodium hydroxide or caustic soda reaction. These are the same reactions which are discussed in mercury cell. Here at anode, the chloride ion in at anode, they can release electron and produce chlorine gas. But at cathode, the hydrogen ion gain electrons from cathode, which are available from anode to cathode. By this way, they produce a hydrogen gas. So sodium ion and hydroxyl ion react, they form a sodium hydroxide. So here is also advantages and disadvantages. Utilization of less pure brine in this process, as I discussed earlier, the brine concentration is very is less because the NaCl also attached with NaOH. So the process requires low voltage than in mercury. In this, the lower voltage in this cell we provide a lower voltage, and the main disadvantage is that the OH are dilute in concentration, Cl is contaminated, and high cost for installation. The last one is membrane cell. This membrane cell is same like a diaphragm cell, but there is the main difference is that in diaphragm cell we use the asbestos, but in membrane cell we can use a membrane. This process same like a diaphragm cell, but in this process asbestos is replaced by a conducting membrane because the sodium ion is only travel from cathode to anode chamber. Also, because the sodium ion also travel from cathode to anode chamber. In this process, the cell is made up of titanium anode and steel cathode. Here is a systematic diagram. In this, you can easily observe that there is the same process, there is the same structure of the cell, but here is a membrane are present. But in diaphragm cell, you can observe that here is an asbestos which are present. So this is the main difference in these cells. So in this cell, we can again add the brine solution. So in brine solution, they can convert into the sodium ion and chloride ion. So this membrane is only permeable for sodium ion. So the only sodium ion can pass through from this chamber to at this chamber. Chloride ion cannot be passed from this chamber to another chamber. So by this way, the chloride ion move toward the anode and they release an electron. By the release of electrons, they can convert into the chlorine gas, and in this at the upper chamber we can collect the chlorine gas. And in this way, electron when chlorine react at anode, they release electrons. So these electrons move from anode to cathode. So cathode carry a negative charge. So these hydroxyl ion when gain an electron from the cathode, they convert it into hydrogen gas. By this way, the hydrogen gas from this chamber we can also get a hydrogen gas, or in this chamber we can get a 30% sodium hydroxyl ion. After that, this sodium hydroxyl ion move into the evaporating chamber, and when we start to evaporate, we collect a water. So this water again passes into this chamber, and we can get a pure 50% sodium hydroxyl ion. These are the same reactions which we discussed in diaphragm cell. So advantages: formation of pure NaOH, process require low voltage than in mercury, no utilization of asbestos and mercury. The disadvantage is 35% concentrated and concentrated NaOH are formed. Chlorine is contaminated, highly purified brine required. In mercury cell, we need a highly purified brine, and the chlorine is also contaminated because they react with the oxygen. They react with the OH ion. Due to the reaction of OH ion, they produce a hypochlorite ion. That's why the chlorine which is collected from the from in these chambers is are contaminated. The main advantage is we don't use any asbestos and mercury. We require a very low voltage, and we can get a pure form of NaOH. So thank you. This is from my side. I hope so. So you got it. You got all the points of my presentation. If you have any question, you can ask me in comment section. Thanks for watching.